So let's get into our first group,
Let's do
shall we?
it.
Let's do it. So we have Grace and Space starting off. And we have a question for you. Have you ever lost or misplaced your items?
All the time.
Have you ever been to space?
All the time,
All
yeah.
the time, right? Have you ever lost your items in space? It's a pretty common thing to have nowadays, right? So Grace in Space focuses on this, and it's an experience built in Viro React, allowing users to help poor Grace locate her misplaced items. Let's see how she did it.
Hi, our team consists of Eva, Anita, Larissa, and me, Claire. We built a virtual reality mobile game called Grace in Space. Our game is about an elderly alien named Grace who's traveling through space on a trip when she lost her bag. But not all is lost. As the player, you can help Grace reclaim all her belongings by tapping on each item individually as they float across the screen. Once the game starts, you have 25 seconds to collect all 10 items. We chose virtual reality because we want the user to feel immersed in space and to interact with three-dimensional objects. Additionally, VR adds an element of surprise and awe to our game. As a signed-in user, you can save your best times and try to beat them the next time you play. Next, Anita will talk about the technologies we used.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, guys. The technologies we used to build this application were React Native, Viro React, Redux, Firestore, Firebase, and SketchUp. We chose React Native and Viro React together due to their compatibility and because the documentation was very good for both technologies. We use React Native for our static components, which make most of our application, while Viro React handled the space component, which is the fun part. Redux was the most important development tool because it helped us to pass information from our dynamic Viro space and our static React Native pages, which was very difficult to do. Additionally, it handled navigation, and it allowed more space to add features and expand our game without affecting our existing components. We used SketchUp for our amazing 3D fun objects floating in space. And lastly, we used Firebase and the Firestore database as backend technology to store our users. And now, Larissa will talk to you about some of the challenges we came across. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. One of the first challenges we faced when building our app was navigating between static screens and virtual reality. In order to navigate to a virtual reality scene, we were required to use Viro's built-in VR navigator. However, it turned out to be incompatible with React Native navigation. To solve this issue, we implemented a system of conditionally rendering screens based on state changes in the Redux store, as opposed to a more traditional system of navigation. Another challenge we faced was that our app incorporated several large images, GIFs, and 3D objects that finished loading at different times. Therefore, we needed to learn to include loading screens for a smoother user experience. Our process was also complicated by the fact that Viro doesn't display logs in the console, making it difficult for us to inspect how our data was changing behind the scenes. This meant that we had to have a very clear understanding of the current state of our data as it was passed between components. We decided to be proactive and reach out to Viro directly about this issue, and fortunately, they responded to us promptly with some helpful advice. Next, Eva will talk about our workflow.
Thank you, Larissa. There were several methods our team used to achieve success in building this fantastic game. Before we started the code, we invested a lot of time in whiteboarding out our idea and code architecture. Putting a lot of effort into detail-oriented planning in the beginning saved us an enormous amount of time once we started coding. Another strategy we kept up was pair programming every day. If we would get stuck, we would divide and do research independently. That way, when we came back together, we would share our findings to arrive at the most optimal solution. As our game takes place in virtual reality, we learned a lot about Viro React. For example, while developing, we discovered that our 3D objects can be animated in different speeds, and we used that to create our 3 different levels. After beta testing, we decided to incorporate the user feedback and create a sign-up feature using Firebase that allows our players to save their best times. All in all, it was a great process, and it felt amazing to be creative together. Thank you.
Wow. was a lot going on. I think what really stood out to me the most was just all the planning and organizing and making sure, like, before they did anything, they knew what needed to be done and, like, how to possibly do that.
Exactly. I mean, VR is so different from what they learn here.
Yeah.
And I always love when people take Grace Hopper and put her in a game here.
Very much so. Cool. So what do we have for our next group?